When I was 18, I started having weird symptoms and minor health issues, and it started to get worse in my 20s, and it got as worse as it possibly could be in 2023 when I was 29 years old. These symptoms included lower back pain, not being able to sleep through the night, getting up at least one or sometimes many more times to pee, and some version of IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and all sorts of weird bowel issues. And I was never able to figure out the reason for any of them. They went on for over a decade. 3 years ago, they were as worse as they possibly could be, where some nights I would be brought to tears. Usually I would just have lower back pain if I ran or did a workout or something, but it was plaguing me all day. Getting up in the middle of the night was sometimes as bad as 5 times, and I would have to get up and pee every single time. And my bowel movements were just all over the place. Sometimes I'd be on the toilet like literally 7 or 8 times a day, and it made absolutely no sense to me. Finally, it got so bad I said enough is enough. I'm going to figure out all of this, and I've basically spent the last 2 or 3 years of my life going down all these rabbit holes and trying to figure out, why do I have these weird symptoms? I had no clue these things on my list were making me sick or giving me symptoms. So if you're out there, you have weird symptoms, especially any of the symptoms that I've mentioned, I'm going to go through my list of everything that I believe got me to that point and why I believe they affected me in the way they did. These are things that I never thought of before in my life, or thought they were very, very minor and could not actually affect me. Luckily, after diving into my health and changing our lifestyle completely, I'm in a much better place, and I'm figuring out things every single day. I'm still far from perfect, but I'm starting to piece all the puzzle pieces together of how I got to the place I was, how it started when I was like 18, 19, and 20, and I finally believe I'm figuring out how to fix it. Today's video is the reasons why, so let's just jump in. First thing on my list is at the end of 2022, I got bit by a cat. On social media, my wife saw that in the local neighborhood, someone had lost a black kitten. The next day after her seeing that, we found a black cat around our shop. Stupidly, I decided to go and get it and did not wear gloves. I kind of tried to catch this thing for like 5-10 minutes and finally I got it, but I was a little bit fed up with it. So I just went to grab it and it bit me on the hand. It was not a rabid cat. I did not go get the rabies vaccine. I kept it in a crate for over 24 hours and it was totally fine. So I wasn't worried about that. However, within 48 hours, my hand absolutely blew up and I got super infected. Cat bites can be very dirty and very dangerous. So I got that infection, which I realized later you can actually get, I believe it's babesia, which is like a Lyme disease cofactor. So I'm still not 100% sure about that, but I definitely could have got some sort of lingering virus or disease, something similar to Lyme from that cat bite, which I never thought about after it had happened. I also got antibiotics and the tetanus shot, which both can have their own side effects. A bunch of people were like, hey, you need antibiotics. That's looking pretty bad. And maybe that was the right thing at the right time. In hindsight, I'm now not a big fan of antibiotics. They can really mess up your gut. And that's part of the reason why I believe my gut was so messed up for all of 2023 is because I took those antibiotics. And I hadn't had any sort of shot for well over 10 years. And so this was the first time I got a shot. So the tetanus shot I don't think was very good for me either. The main reason for that would be heavy metals. As I will discuss later, I already have some version of heavy metal poisoning, which I had never thought of as well. So I get bit, which leads to some sort of infection. I take antibiotics, which may help immediately and get rid of the infection, which it did. However, then you're going to have the effects of the antibiotics and then the effects of the tetanus shot. All three of those could have their own side effects and may have caused me more harm than I realized. The next biggest one is probably our diet. My wife decided to do a bodybuilding challenge right at the end of 2021. So in the bodybuilding world, you count your macros so much. One of the main things they focus on is a low-fat diet. In hindsight, I would never, ever go on a low-fat diet ever again and would not recommend it to any single person. Fat is super important. Fat does not make you fat. At the time, in 2022 and in 2023, I believed that fat made you fat. So why would you ever pick regular version of a product when there's a low-fat version, which is what we did for basically over 2 years. There are non-fat soluble vitamins and there are fat soluble vitamins, and you need fat to absorb those fat soluble vitamins. Also, just need things like omega-3 fatty acids, and it's also better to burn fat instead of glucose in your body. And I knew none of this at the time, and yet we went on an over 2-year low-fat diet. I think this is going to hurt any single person, not to mention this is just one of like 10 to 15 things on my list. Also, going on the low-fat diet, we ended up eating way more processed things. Because you're trying to count your macros, you want a nutrition label on everything. A piece of broccoli or a piece of steak usually doesn't have a nutrition label, but the pasta or the bread or the cookie or whatever you're eating does, so then you can count your macros a lot better. Then we end up eating protein powder and protein bars and all of these things that at the time you think are good because they're high protein, low fat, but they end up being processed garbage. Then on top of it, 2023 was also a very, very busy year for us, which I will get into later in my list. And because of that, we end up eating more processed things again, more processed things on the go, more protein bars, protein shakes, all of those things that make it much more convenient and accessible. And that is not good for us, especially when you're dealing with all the other things on my list. So diet was a huge component. I will never go on a low-fat diet ever again. In fact, I'm eating a very, very high-fat diet, and I'm probably actually skinnier and leaner than I ever have been in my entire life, because what actually makes you fat is carbohydrates that spike your blood sugar, and your body is burning glucose instead of fat. Also, fat makes you feel more full. So that whole thing is just, it makes no sense. The whole low fat trend is bananas. Don't do it. The next reason would be stress. Again, we had a very, very busy year. In that year, we actually got married in September of 2023. My sister also got married that year at our house, and my wife was also a maid of honor for another wedding. And that all happened between May and September of 2023. So we were very busy with the wedding world. And at the same time, we were actually tearing down our main house we were living in. We were just living in our cottage. We were tearing it down and rebuilding the entire thing. So the stress of all of that. So busy with the weddings, busy with the house, and then the financials with all of that. So 2023 was the most expensive year of my life. So then you have the stress of it being busy and it being very expensive. Again, while all of this is happening, you don't even realize it. While these symptoms are getting worse, I'm not even realizing that these things are affecting me in the moment. You're just kind of living life. I think that one on my list is probably the most obvious of everything, but I think it's the most easily overlooked in your own life. It's a lot easier for other people to look back and see the stress that people are going through, but sometimes in your own life, it's so easy to miss. So it's still very important to mention. So we got married in September 2023. Post-wedding is really when I got sick, which is probably the worst it was November 2023. So that was post-wedding and post our honeymoon, which I think definitely played a part of it, because we went and honeymooned in Europe for just over 2 weeks. So we got the time change twice. We got all the traveling, which traveling can be very unhealthy for you, flying on planes and diet changes and jet lag and exposure to all sorts of different bugs and parasites and toxins. And you're drinking a lot more alcohol, which I don't really drink that much, but at our wedding, and then when you're on your honeymoon, you end up drinking a lot more alcohol as well. So doing all that is just another piece of the puzzle, another thing on the list that makes it so by the time I hit November, I was the worst I've probably ever been for all of my symptoms. Several nights in November, I was actually brought to tears going to bed, not because I was really in pain, but just because the symptoms were so confusing and so chronic, where it was like every day you're having bowel symptoms, you're not sleeping. I have major back pain, and it's not like the pain is like an 8 or 9 out of 10. It's just like a chronic, like 4 low-grade pain that just like never goes away. And I'm sitting there so confused, being like, I'm not going to sleep tonight, and I don't understand what's going on. Thank God I'm far away from that, and hopefully and I believe I'm getting better every single day. Okay, next reason. Propane stove. In our cottage, which we lived at for a year and a half, by the way. We moved in there at the end of 2022, right around where that cat bite was. And then we moved out at the beginning of 2024. So living in this house was definitely part of this whole experience getting to there. Is in this house, there's a propane stove inside the kitchen, and there's no ventilation. Air quality is a major problem for many people, and they don't realize it. Our cottage has in-floor heating and no regular ventilation. So including no ventilation for the stovetop. So any cooking we're doing, any burning we're doing is going to really ruin the air quality. Most people don't notice. You can't see it. You can't really feel it. But if you get an air filter with a PM 2.5 sensor, this will tell you, I think it's particulate matter up to 2.5 microns, what it detects. We have one in all of our bedrooms and in our kitchen now. It'll actually go off depending on when your air quality gets worse for all the particulate matter in the air. And anytime you cook, if we don't have the ventilation system on, it spikes into the red, and you can see how the air quality gets so much worse. Again, you cannot see this with the naked eye, and you cannot feel it. Now, anytime I cook, our ventilation system is running usually at full blast, especially if anything is being cooked at high heat or going to burn. That's super important. This house had no ventilation system, but worse, it was a propane stove. So the propane is being burned inside your kitchen in the center of the home, and the air has no ability to be filtered or escaped. In the summer, we would sometimes open the windows and stuff like that, which would help. But there were some studies that apparently have been done. Again, I haven't read them myself, but I totally believe them, that people that lived with a propane stove inside their home actually had lower IQs than people that didn't. And to me, that makes total sense. You're burning propane, which is going to be a toxic off gas and is clearly going to affect you in a negative way, but you're never going to feel it or realize it in the moment while it's happening. What I would actually like to do for our cottage, because I haven't changed it, is switch it to an electrical stove, and then I would like to add some sort of like ventilation system to it. The setup that it has is kind of weird, but I'm sure there's a way I could figure it out. So that's what I'm hoping to do in the future. But yeah, if you have a propane stove, that's not good for you, and you should be venting it at least at all times. And if you're not venting it, that's even worse. Again, while all this was happening, I didn't think it affected me at all. Some of these things I didn't realize for like 2-3 years later. Some of them I've only realized recently, like, wait a second, that totally could have affected me. Burning a propane stove and burning food in our kitchen that has absolutely no airflow is not going to be good for air quality, and we're going to be breathing all of that in. The next point is also similar to the air quality, is actually plug in fragrances. Went down the rabbit hole, watched a ton of videos, bunch of podcasts, how terrible fragrance is for you. It is essentially just chemicals that are made by companies. It is not actually a natural smell. If it says lemon fragrance on it, there's zero lemon in it. It is a chemical concoction that a company has made, and they don't actually have to list the ingredients. They get to protect their creation of this fragrance, so no one can copy their design of this chemical or their smell. My wife loved the idea of having a house that smelled good, so she put these fragrances all throughout the home. I've watched many videos, many mentions of podcasts, and to me it makes complete sense that all these things are doing is just burning chemicals to create a nice smell in your home, but they're actually releasing endocrine disruptors that are just going to mess your hormones up. This is essentially just poison in your home. And again, if you have less airflow, if you have no HVAC system, if you have no cold air return like our cottage did, that is just going to sit in the home forever because there's no airflow. I will never, ever buy a fragrance plug-in ever again. And if I'm ever near one, I will unplug it if I have the opportunity. Once you realize that it is just pure poison, it makes no sense why you'd ever have one of those around your home. They are only hurting you for the illusion that it actually smells better, but it's just a burning chemical. There are way healthier options like beeswax candles. I'm sure there's a bunch of other stuff. That's what we use right now is we have beeswax candles, pure beeswax as well, nothing added to it. Get those chemicals out of your life. So that's my rant on fragrance. Unplug those things, throw them out. They're a total waste of money. Next one is a big one. And this one took me at least a year and a half to realize till after we had moved out of the house that of how much it was affecting us. So this cottage that we lived at for a year and a half, it's in the middle of nowhere. There's not another house for like almost 2 kilometers away. So it's awesome. Completely private. There's just woods surrounding it. Beautiful place. It was amazing to live there. But because you're in the woods and trees and there's ponds and everything, there's a lot of bugs during the summer. There's a lot of mosquitoes. So what we did is we got Weed Man to spray pesticides all around the house. I filmed videos during the summer up and around the property, and we don't like getting bit by bugs all day. My guys that would help me film the videos, they don't like getting bit by the mosquitoes either, and neither does my wife. So we're like, hey, we'll spray pesticides. We'll get Weed Man to come in. And then my buddy owns a landscape company as well, and they have commercial pesticides that you would spray at like businesses or a golf course or something like this. So that's actually illegal to spray on your own personal property. But this property is owned by my business, and it's completely private in the middle of nowhere, so no one's going to call it in on us or report us, or it's only affecting us, right? So we would get them to spray every like 2 or 3 weeks a commercial pesticide all around the house in the main area of the property. And it worked. After they spray, there's literally very little bugs around the area. And then you go near the woods and there's bugs everywhere. So for us, we're like, this seems, it's totally amazing. This is the greatest thing ever. We were telling everyone about how amazing it is that we had this opportunity that we could spray. And we have 2 sprays from Weed Man and then this other company. It goes back and forth. So we're constantly always getting a spray. But in hindsight, pesticides, especially the more commercial, more intense versions, are just complete poison. These things kill bugs essentially on contact. A mosquito lands, it gets the pesticides on them, and it paralyzes them, and then they're paralyzed until they just die because they can't get water or food. It paralyzes their nervous system. Yes, I may be a lot bigger than a mosquito, but poison is still poison, and it adds up when you're exposed to it daily. And as we're running around filming, we're rolling on the ground, we're jumping through trees. I was probably getting it all over my skin, which is also frowned upon. You're not supposed to touch it or breathe it in, which I certainly was. And I was getting the double dose of the residential version and the commercial version. There's been a whole bunch of studies released in the last year or two that people that live closer to a golf course have a much higher chance of getting Alzheimer's or dementia. And the reason they believe because of the amount of pesticides sprayed, which a golf course can be some of the most sprayed places on the planet. They will spray it with pesticides, insecticides, and herbicides all at the same time. You don't want to be getting bit by a mosquito while you're playing golf, right? But you also don't realize that you're being poisoned at the exact same time. So people that live near a golf course are being chronically exposed to high levels of these chemicals and not realizing it because it's in the air, it gets in the water supply, and it just gets spread around in multiple ways, and it's totally odorless and tasteless. Most people spraying Roundup in their garden and in their backyard and on their sidewalks, like, oh, it's nothing, it doesn't affect me, I can't feel it, but not realizing how much it actually is affecting their health. And then later going like, why do I have headaches? Why am I not sleeping well? Why is my gut messed up? Because that poison, those pesticides, are directly affecting your gut in a negative way. This one I actually think is one of the biggest ones that affected me, especially because it's the commercial pesticides. Like we got a super intense dose, sometimes a day or 2 before I would film, and then we'd be running around in it, rolling around in it. Not good. I regret that one so bad. I think that is one of the biggest ones that messed me up. Next, at our cottage, there's a beautiful pond. You can swim in it. However, I don't think the pond was very good for me during this year because, again, all of the pesticide spray, whenever it rained, all the water runoff would go into that pond. And again, you would think, oh, it's just a little bit of pesticide. It gets all watered down. down, but we were spraying it once every week or two, and that would add up through the summer. Also, we add a blue dye to the pond, which makes it look beautiful and helps prevent algae grow in the pond. Now, I actually do think this dye is quite harmless for the most part. However, we added way too much. I realize now that you could add just 3 or 4 packs per year to have it a nice blue color. That year, I think we added 8 packs. If there is any negative chemicals in this blue dye, which I'm sure there's some, again, I think this is a lower one, but because we added so much, and then potential pesticides in it. And then I was swimming in this pond almost every day. I just think I got this cumulative dose that affected me in a very negative way. So now I'm not swimming in it every day. I also am not 100% sure that actually did affect me. And also adding the pond dye, now moving 2 or 3 years forward, we're only putting in like 2 or 3 packs, which is way less. So I regret adding that much pond dye. I regret swimming in it that much when we were spraying pesticides all around the pond every day that was clearly being rained into the pond. Yeah, in hindsight, I should not have been swimming in it in 2023, or at minimum, I shouldn't have been swimming in it every single day while we were doing that. Next point is also pesticides again, but from a different source. So we were completely surrounded by trees at our cottage, but I would do a big bike loop, which I think was 10K or something like that. Not like a regular neighborhood block. It's like farm fields and crown land and forest. And sometimes I would either run that or I'd bike that, but most of it is farmland. So all of that farmland is also sprayed with pesticides. So most of my life, I haven't been exposed to farmers' fields. Yes, if you are constantly around farmers' fields, these guys are spraying it on a regular basis with glyphosate, with other pesticides. Again, it seems small. People listening to this might think that actually doesn't affect you, but it's going to add up. Every little bit of toxins are going to add up, especially if you're out there just after they sprayed it or while they're spraying it. I can't remember ever biking or running by them while they were spraying it, but I wouldn't be surprised if I did. Okay, done ranting about pesticides at the moment. But next is going to be EMF. If you don't know what EMF is, that's electric magnetic fields. Some people can be very electrostatic sensitive, I believe is the right term, something like that you can be very sensitive to EMFs. I think EMFs negatively is affecting everyone for the most part. Most people don't feel it, but some people can be very sensitive, and I might be one of those people because I'm so sensitive to all these other things and have these other exposures. So the first major EMF exposure was in my office. Previously, I just used to have 2 computers in 2 different locations, but because we were staying at our cottage for this year and a half, I actually moved both my computers onto my main desk side by side, and I have a giant server, which is essentially another 2 computers that stores all of my footage. And previously in our home, I had it in the basement of our house, so quite a ways away from me, probably like 20, 30 feet, and through like a floor and beside a concrete wall, so it was quite a ways away. However, I had in a room that's significantly smaller than this, I had both my computers right in front of me at my feet, and I had my server maybe just like 4 feet behind me. So I'm exposed to essentially 4 giant computers running at full blast, all within like 5 feet of me. So those computers and all the devices connected to them are going to be releasing high levels of electromagnetic fields. Yeah, I don't think that was good for me either. That's going to be a stressor that, again, you're not feeling at the moment, but it's just putting stress on the body all day, especially while you're working. Then, previously at our house, before we moved to our cottage here, we just had one giant router in the center of the house that did the entire house. At our cottage here, I have Amazon Eero Wi-Fi routers, like 6 of them all over the house. The cottage is quite large and has log beams for the exterior walls. So I found because of that, the Wi-Fi connection couldn't get everywhere. And I also just wanted it to be so you could get it in the basement, you get it upstairs, you could get it outside quite a way. So I bought all these expensive Amazon Eero Wi-Fi routers to spread the signal out as far as possible. But that meant there was a Wi-Fi router in like most rooms of the house, and these Wi-Fi routers are much more powerful than even the router that we had at our previous house. So now we're being exposed to high levels of EMF from these routers wherever we go in the house at all times, while we're sleeping, no matter what we're doing, while we're watching TV, while we're relaxing, while we're eating. There's a powerful router not far from us, and that just adds another piece to the puzzle. If you don't think EMF could potentially be bad for you, I highly recommend you read the book EMF'd by Dr. Mercola. A lot of people can be negatively impacted by EMF. Next point is starting in 2021, me and my entire crew of guys that I filmed with started drinking bubblies. I would buy cases and cases of bubblies, and that's what we would always drink throughout the day and while filming. And so I started having 1, 2, sometimes 3 bubblies a day because I thought it was the healthier option. It's not a soda, it's just sparkling water with a little bit of natural flavor. It's super good for you. However, I have some serious questions of what's in those natural flavors. I don't really trust any brand that now says natural flavors because that doesn't make any sense. These are chemical concoctions again. No one actually knows what's in them other than the company, and they don't actually have to say because it's protected. Next, drinking from cans is going to release all sorts of microplastics. You think a can, a bubbly or a Coke or something like that is metal, but you can't just have a acidic beverage or even water just on metal because it'll oxidize. So they have a protective plastic layering in that can. Look up a video of it. And everyone that's drinking from a can is getting microplastics just as if you would drink it from plastic water bottle or something like that. So from 21 and all the way to the end of 2023 and throughout 2024, I was drinking a ton of plastic bottles, tons of Gatorades, tons of bubblies, way more than I had previously. Again, for the convenience of our busy lifestyle of traveling and the weddings and living not in our main house. So we're being exposed to way more microplastics and chemicals because we're drinking things out of bottles. Now I drink mostly everything out of a metal cup. Way better, way easier, way cheaper too. Next point is vitamins. In 2022 and 2023, my wife would actually get vitamins for me and herself every single day. She'd put out a little 1-a-day multivitamin and some vitamin C and 2 Brazil nuts and a couple other different things. And at the time, it wasn't really a priority for me. That changed because over the last 2 or 3 years, I got up to a point where I was taking 15 supplements a day, and it became like something I was super focused on and cared a lot about. Now I know all sorts of stuff about supplementation, but at the time I knew absolutely nothing. But I believe a lot of the supplementation she did actually helped, especially the vitamin C and the Brazil nuts could be very good for you. However, we were taking multivitamins, just 1-a-days, and those can be either a total waste of money or they can actually hurt you. It turns out I have the MTHFR gene defect, which up to 40 or sometimes even as high as 50% of people have some sort of MTHFR defect. It means they have a hard time methylating folic acid, which is in basically everything nowadays. Most multivitamins and our entire grain supply is sprayed with folic acid. Anywhere you see the words enriched or fortified, that means they are adding some sort of synthetic B vitamins, and one of those is folic acid. And a large portion of the population, including myself, I have a double break, so I have it I believe as worse as you can get, have a hard time dealing with folic acid. That means your multivitamin that contains folic acid and the bread that you're eating is going to hurt your gut. You're not going to feel good. You're going to get bloated. It's going to give you fatigue. No one realizes that it's affecting them. So one of the first things I did that helped me get out of this funk in 2023 is I just cut out all bread, all grains. Anything that's enriched, it has to be organic. If it's organic, it should not be fortified or enriched with folic acid unless you're in Canada, like I am, which I found out later. It is mandatory for them to enrich it or fortify it with folic acid, even if it says organic. So yeah, I even avoid most organic breads. And that actually made a huge difference. That actually really helped. So yeah, our bread supply is pretty messed up. Yeah. This whole journey, I've realized a lot of things are messed up. Our food supply, our air quality, pesticides. Yeah, these things hurt you more than you realize. And once you start getting them out of your life and start making life changes, you can see a huge improvement. And I've definitely seen some major improvements. So that might be a different video of exactly what I did to improve my life. Comment down below if you've made it this far and you want to see that. And thank you for making it this far if you did. Next point. Mold. Mold is affecting a ton of people. Definitely affected me. There's a chance I grew up in a moldy bedroom. There's a chance that most people actually grow up in a moldy bedroom. Mold is everywhere. Many buildings that have water damage. This is schools, hospitals, any commercial building that has any sort of water damage is going to have some level of mold. And at our cottage, where we were staying at, since we bought it in 2021, we actually had 3 floods in the basement. And at the time, we never got them remediated correctly. It was kind of like we just dried up the floor and kind of moved on. And one of the times we actually had all our personal stuff in there and the floor flooded and all of our personal stuff got wet. So I believe a ton of mold actually kind of grew on all of our personal stuff and was in that basement because of that. And I was exposed to all of that. So yeah, floods can be pretty dangerous. And I did not take it as seriously as I should at the moment. Even my wife was like, we should bring someone in, get them to completely deal with this. And just to save some money at the time, I was like, no, it's not that big of a deal. I'll just clean it up in a couple of days. And that was totally a mistake. But since then we ripped out the entire floor. We added a sump pump and have done a couple other things. So huge improvements there. But yeah, at the time, it took me a while to realize how serious it was before I actually dealt with it and cleaned it up. So I've realized I've had a bunch of different exposure with mold in different areas. And that is definitely one of the root causes of many people's issues and my issue. Yeah, that should be all fixed now. But while living there in 2023, that was not good. So those are all the main points that I have of why I specifically was sick in November of 2023. And at the moment, while this was happening, I didn't realize any of these things were affecting us in a negative way. But I believe everything happens for a reason. If you or someone you know has cancer or an autoimmune disease or some sort of weird symptoms, it's not just because you were born with it. It's not just because you have a genetic disorder. It's not just because that's just some things happen. Bad things happen to people sometimes. No, there's always a reason why. But many of these things are invisible puzzle pieces affecting you that you do not realize are there. These fragrances, these pesticides, the propane burning in the stove, the folic acid in the multivitamin, they are all invisible and they are causing havoc on possibly yours, but definitely mine, and immune system and nervous system, and just messing with your bodies. So if you've made it this far in this video, thank you for watching. I hope you've learned something here. Maybe some of these things that have affected me, maybe you've realized you've been in a similar situation and some of these things may have affected you just in your own life or own situation. There's always a reason. Just keep asking why, keep trying to figure out what's wrong, and be super sensitive to everything that happens. Anytime now that I feel sick or get a weird symptom, I always go, wait, what just happened? Why do I feel this way? What changed in my life in the last 5 minutes or the last 5 hours or the last 5 days that has led this symptom, that has led this change? Why do I have fatigue? Oh, I ate this a couple days ago. Oh, I went here this morning. What exposures, what changes in my life are affecting me? I used to never think like this, but now every single day, any moment that a major change, especially in the way I feel, happens, I immediately stop and go, why? What just changed in my life? And super sensitive people and people that are sick, I think they just need to start doing this. If you have, again, something as intense as cancer and autoimmune, you need to start asking why. Just don't trust some doctor or some person on the internet. Ask the question why a million times. Don't even trust me. Ask why a million times until you find the answer. Two other things that I think really affected me that a lot of people are missing, that wasn't specific from 2023, but I believe really started when I was a kid and a teenager, around 18, 19, that had just kind of like grew and grew and grew. And as part of the problem is parasites. I traveled when I was 18 and 19. I think that was a big trigger. I got very sick a couple of times while I was traveling and was never really the same. And then mercury fillings. I had 6 mercury fillings in my mouth, which can lead to mercury or heavy metal toxicity, which can cause a lot of problems. So I actually think those are some really big problems that many other people also have. But those were, I think, that the things that started when I was younger, and now dealing with all of these other stressors that I mentioned in the video, on top of those, on top of the mold, on top of the infection from the cat bite, was just like this giant onslaught of toxins that my body could not deal with. And I didn't have the proper nutrition and the proper fats to help deal with it because I went on this low-fat diet. The mold, the mercury in my mouth, the parasites, the hidden infections, and all of these other toxins and things that have messed with my gut, I think really messed me up. Hopefully, if you've never heard of any of these things possibly affecting you and you've made it this far in the video, you can now maybe start digging in and start seeing reasons why maybe you've had symptoms and maybe why you are sick. I don't want anyone to be sick. I don't want to be sick anymore. I have this insane passion to become absolutely as healthy as I can be and get rid of all of these symptoms. You want to see a video of me going over all the things I did to drastically lower all of my symptoms? Let me know in the comments down below. I'm hoping to make that video in the future, and hopefully that can help some people as well. So if this video helped you at all, if you have any questions for me, let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to help as many people as I can, and maybe I can point you in the right direction. I've listened to hundreds of hours of podcasts, YouTube videos, Audible books, reading my own books, and just going down all these rabbit holes trying to figure out what's wrong with me. And so I'm not an expert. I may not know the answers, but maybe I can help point some people in the right direction. And if I can make a difference, I'd love to help. So yeah, my name is Aaron. Consider subscribing, and I got more videos coming soon. Thanks so much for watching. Appreciate it. Peace.